So codependency is a pattern that has been coming up for many of you that I'm working with lately, and I wanted to create a little video to explain what codependency is, what it isn't, and mostly to let you know that it's not a death sentence or a life sentence. It's not something that you are inherently a codependent person. It's more a set pattern of behaviors that you can absolutely change. Now, many of you have learned about codependency as it relates to somebody who is an alcoholic or even an addict, but codependency can really happen in any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic or with coworkers or even parent and child. So generally speaking, codependency is any time that one person needs another person to behave in a certain way in order for that person to feel okay. And so what this person who needs to feel okay often does are these behavior patterns to try to get that person to be that certain way that this person needs them to be in order for this person to feel okay. So some patterns that we see can be manipulation, they can be gaslighting, they can be avoiding, so holding other people at a distance. It can be withholding interactions or affection, attention, things like that. It can also be very controlling, so trying to find ways to control that other person to make them do certain things or to stop them from doing other things. What I also think is important is for you to understand ways that we can work on codependent behaviors if you're finding that you yourself may exhibit some codependent behaviors, or if you're finding that your partner or other people in your life are indeed codependent for you. So the first thing we would do is we would talk about ways in which codependency shows up in your life. So you would need to kind of be a bit of an investigator and understand what is happening in your life, where these patterns are coming up. And then there are ways that we can help you practice setting and holding boundaries. So boundaries are you knowing your limits. It's the ability for you to say to somebody, I want you to stop doing this thing, or I need you to do this thing that you're not doing. Now, that may kind of sound like codependency, right? Because I just said, if I need somebody to do something in order for me to feel okay, that's called codependency. Well, we don't want to confuse codependency with interdependency, right? So for example, in romantic relationships, it's very common for us to depend on one another because we're in a partnership. Many times we live with that person or we're co-parenting with that person, and we need to be able to depend on one another. So we need to communicate what we need them to do or refrain from doing. Also, it's important for us to be healthy for ourselves, to be able to be very clear on the behaviors from other people that we're willing to accept and the ones that we're willing to not tolerate at all. So it can feel a little bit scary to set a boundary. And so that's why I wrote a blog that is how to set a boundary in 3 simple steps. Basically, it's communicate the boundary clearly to that person. So saying, I want you to, for example, I want you to stop making comments about my mother. And then when they cross that boundary again, to explain to them again, remember, I don't want you to say those kinds of things, and to express to them the action you're going to take if and when they don't stop. And so usually this action is to disengage. So if you're texting with somebody, you can say, you know what, I'll text you back tomorrow, or I need some space. Or if you're talking to that person in person or on the phone, you'll say, I'm going to discontinue the call if you continue to say those things, or you just simply walk away. Now, this seems very scary to many of you, to our inner children who are trying to be very good and who don't want to rock the boat. So we may be afraid of what we feel. Many people report feeling guilt when they're setting a boundary, even if it's for their own good. Or we are afraid of, anxious about how that other person is going to react. And so after we set our boundaries, it's really important to have a plan as to how you're going to navigate or cope with the emotions that you feel, and how you're going to cope with or respond to how that person may be responding to you. Maybe they don't let you walk away. Maybe they come in front of you and try to confront you, or they continue the conversation, or they insult you, or what have you. So it's important to have a plan set in place before you go and set your boundary with that person. And I would be more than happy to talk to you about what's going on with your particular little kid, what's going on with your other parts of self, so that we can find the best way for you to be able to cope with everything that you're feeling after you set a boundary.